The diner was buzzing with the usual late-morning rush when the storm hit. Not the kind that rumbles across the sky, but the kind that erupts inside four walls when anger meets injustice. The smell of coffee and sizzling bacon hung thick in the air as customers chatted over their plates, unaware that one small act of courage was about to change four lives forever. Behind the counter, a young waitress named Clara moved like clockwork. Polite, efficient, her pink uniform slightly faded, but her smile unwavering. She wasn't just serving food, she was serving warmth in a world that had rarely given her any. But all it took was one cruel moment to shatter that fragile peace. The diner's manager, Mr. Grayson, a man known for his temper and arrogance, was barking orders louder than usual that morning. His voice sliced through the diner like a whip as he scolded employees for things as minor as spilled coffee or slow service. Yet when his attention turned toward a little girl, no more than 9 years old, everything changed. The child had accidentally knocked over a glass of orange juice while waiting for her order, and Grayson's fury found a new target. Before anyone could process what was happening, the manager's voice thundered, "Whose kid is this? Look at this mess!" The girl froze, her lip trembling, tears pooling in her big brown eyes. She stammered an apology, but the words barely escaped before Grayson's harsh tone silenced her. That was when Clara stepped in. Without hesitation, she rushed to the little girl's side, shielding her with her own body as if protecting her from a physical blow. "She's just a child," Clara said firmly, her voice trembling but strong. "It was an accident. Don't you dare yell at her. Before we go further, if you believe kindness is stronger than cruelty and that everyone deserves a second chance, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of hope and humanity to light." The diner went quiet. You could hear the clink of a fork dropping onto a plate somewhere in the back. Grayson's face flushed red as he turned toward Clara, his pride wounded in front of his staff and customers. "You're defending her? You're defending this mess?" he spat. "You don't tell me how to run my diner. You're fired, Clara." The words hit her like a slap, echoing louder than the chatter that started to bubble up again. The little girl clung to Clara's apron, crying softly. But Clara didn't argue. She didn't plead. She just knelt down, wiped the girl's tears, and whispered that everything would be okay, even though she knew she had just lost the only job keeping her and her sick mother afloat. At a corner booth, a man had been silently watching. Broad-shouldered, leather vest patched with the words Road Kings MC, and a beard that framed a face hardened by years of survival. Hank Bear Lawson wasn't the kind of man people approached easily. But as he watched the waitress defend his daughter, something inside him shifted. He had brought little Lily to the diner that morning as a treat after weeks of long rides and rough nights on the road. The biker's world was no place for a child, but since Lily's mother had passed, Hank had been doing his best to be both father and mother, though most days he barely felt like either. When Grayson fired Clara, Hank stood up, his heavy boots thudding against the floor. The other customers fell silent again. His deep voice cut through the tension like steel. "That woman just protected my daughter." Grayson turned, eyes wide, realizing too late who he had insulted. The patch on Hank's vest wasn't just decoration. It carried a reputation that traveled through every highway and back road for miles. But Hank didn't threaten, didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at Clara, his eyes softening as he said, "You didn't have to do that." "Thank you." Clara forced a smile, brushing dust off her uniform as she held Lily's hand. "Any decent person would have done the same," she replied quietly. But Hank could tell she didn't believe that. Not after the way the manager had humiliated her. He wanted to say something more, to offer help, but Clara gathered her things quickly and left, walking out into the daylight that felt too bright for a woman who'd just lost everything. That night, Hank couldn't shake her face from his mind. He had seen strength before, men who stood tall against pain, bikers who rode through storms without flinching, but this was different. Clara's courage hadn't come from pride or anger. It came from compassion, the kind that demanded no recognition. He thought about how she had shielded Lily, how her voice had cracked when she said those words, "Don't you dare yell at her." Something about that moment dug deep into Hank's soul. 2 days later, Hank found himself riding through the small town again. He told himself it was coincidence, but he knew better. He parked his bike outside the old laundromat near the diner, and there she was, sitting on the curb, a cardboard box beside her, her uniform folded neatly on top. Her eyes were tired, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She looked up when she heard the rumble of his engine. For a moment she hesitated, unsure if she should smile or hide. Hank took off his helmet and said, "You look like you could use a coffee." They sat together in silence for a while at a nearby bench. Clara finally spoke, her voice low. "I don't regret standing up for your daughter. I just wish it hadn't cost me my job. My mom's sick and rent's overdue. I don't know what to do." Hank listened, his heart heavy. For a man who had lived by the rule of the road, never get attached, never stay too long, he suddenly found himself wanting to fix something that wasn't made of steel or chrome. The next morning, Hank walked into the same diner with his entire biker crew. The manager's face turned pale the moment they stepped inside, the roar of motorcycles still echoing from outside. Hank didn't raise his voice, didn't make a scene. He simply placed a small envelope on the counter and said, "You fired the wrong person." Inside was a stack of bills, enough to buy the diner if Hank wanted to, but that wasn't his goal. "You're going to apologize to that woman," Hank said calmly, "and you're going to think real hard before you treat another human being like dirt again." The sight of a tattooed biker gang standing up for a waitress who had nothing shocked everyone. But what truly stunned them was what happened next. Hank didn't stop there. He turned the old garage his club used as a repair shop into a small community diner, one where people like Clara could work without fear or cruelty. He asked her to manage it, saying simply, "You've got more heart than most people I know." Clara was speechless. For someone who had been treated like she didn't matter, it felt like being seen for the first time. Months passed, and the diner became a symbol of something beautiful in that rough little town. The bikers, once seen as outlaws, now served meals to hungry kids and repaired cars for struggling families. Hank's daughter Lily spent her afternoons there, helping Clara bake pies and learning the kindness her father had rediscovered through the woman who had once shielded her from a bully. But the story didn't end there. One rainy evening, Hank found Clara sitting by the window after closing time, staring out at the wet street. She turned to him and said softly, "You saved me." He shook his head, his voice deep but gentle. "No, Clara, you saved me. I was lost for a long time. You reminded me what real strength looks like. In that quiet diner, filled with the scent of fresh coffee and rain, two broken souls who had both lost everything, found something they didn't know they needed. Hope. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to help us spread more stories that remind the world kindness still exists. Every share, every comment helps us reach someone who might need a little light today. Before you go, I want you to comment below, "Kindness can change everything," because that's the truth this story carries. A waitress who stood up when it mattered most, a biker who saw her courage and turned his life around, and a little girl who learned that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who choose compassion over fear. And as the neon lights of that small-town diner glowed through the night, the sign above the door flickered with new meaning. Not just a place to eat, but a place where broken hearts could heal and strangers could become family. Clara never imagined her kindness would ripple so far. Hank never imagined redemption would find him in the form of a waitress's bravery, and Lily would grow up knowing that even in the hardest moments, there is always someone brave enough to stand up for what's right. Because kindness, no matter how small, always comes back. Sometimes on roaring wheels, sometimes in gentle hands, but always when you need it most.